Unplugged with Nicki Marie. We are here back for part 2 with Joe Frost, aka Super Nanny. Prepare to hear it like it is. Prepare to hear the vulnerable side of Joe and the work that she does with families. Prepare to talk about mental load, connection, presence, marriage with kids, grief of pregnancy loss, miscarriage. We are going to cover a lot more in the next 30 something minutes. So here we go. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. I love you all. Enjoy. This episode is for you.
There's going to be days when it's tits up. You're like, what happened? What happened?
Yes.
It was.
There's some days they get on the bus and I'm like, holy shit, that morning was rough. And other days I'm like, wow, I'm the best mom ever. This was great. Everybody's good. We're like,
But let's change that best mum, not mum, best mum.
yeah.
Like your mum, and they love you unconditionally. Your mum. And
yes.
Today you're doing the best you can. And you know what? Some days you know that you're not as well. You're like, do you know what? I totally am not doing good today. I'm having a rough day. The kids are pissing me off. I'm agitated. I'm annoyed about something else. I'm projecting on the kids. And you know what? I need a reset. I need a reset
that
right
was me
now.
yesterday. That was me yesterday. And I said it to my daughter who's 10. I said, wow, I was like, woof today. And she just kind of laughed at me. I said, just sorry about that. I just was having a day and we all have our days. And
you give her permission as a role model to show her that life is like that. Life is like that, right? But what you're showing her is that that's okay. It's okay as well. So the balance for a lot of parents is being able to not project, but to understand sometimes when your children are triggering old wounds within yourself so that you can separate that from your parenting. Because when that becomes involved, that's a projection. And then you are nurturing and making decisions based on what little Nicki needs rather than little Layla.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense.
And that happens over time. And that happens with doing the work. And that happens with understanding more about, you know, your own upbringing and asking questions and maybe reading different material and giving yourself some grace. Because there's, you know, I've been in this field, Nicki, for nearly 40 years, 4 decades. And publicly, I've been doing this for 2 decades.
Yep.
And we need to have more compassion for ourselves and more grace, because I think my profession, my professional field has just made us ruminate over and over and over and over again, right? Lots of different things about parenting on social media. And sometimes I think it makes it worse because there is this kind of narrative of how to cope and as if we're already failing. There's no fail. There's no fail. There's just lessons. There's no fail.
It's the same reason we don't want our kids on social media is this like comparison. Is it the same for moms or dads who are digesting?
Do parents compare? Absolutely. But what you
saying social media is that it's like we don't want our kids on it. We are like getting all our. So talk about that. What have you seen?
You know, look, monkey see, monkey do, right? We sit there and say we don't want our kids on social media, and yet they're trying to fight for our attention because we're flicking on social media, right? And this is something that we can do something about, because we can make smarter decisions with respect to the age that our children have social media, the restrictions and limitations and set timings of when they are allowed to have educational entertainment, education or entertainment on those tools, right? On the iPad, for example. If they're watching certain shows that requires parental assessment of being able
Right.
to look at what they are, and us also recognizing that in the first 5 years of early learning childhood development, the best box is this right here, us as human beings, the human interaction between infant and adult, period. So realistically, it is realistic for a child under the age of 3 years old not to be on social media,
Yeah.
meaning, not to be on the iPad or you giving
Right.
them their phone. The problem
Right.
is that parents do it anyway. And I'm not going to be a popular voice right now, but I'm going to be the voice that you do need to hear. And that is that we really do, as parents, need to stop giving ourselves excuses. We do need to turn around and say, look, we are responsible for this. In the same way that we are responsible when we go to the supermarket and we choose the foods that we put in the cupboard and the fridge. We go to the supermarket. We buy the food. We put it in the pantry. We put it in the fridge. We do that. The same way that we get this and we hand it over to them. The cell phone didn't just drop in the bugaboo, did it? It didn't just
Right.
drop in the upper stroller. It didn't just drop into the crib, the iPad. So again, when we look at communication, speech, language, when we look at the stress that causes the developmental delay, right? Remember, the brain is building millions and millions of synapses and wiring, right? And we're interrupting with that every time, right? Children learn with human interaction. They're loving parents, guardians, family, friends, nature, right? Outside, lifting rocks, looking for snails, looking for the worms, picking up leaves, looking outside. This is natural play. However, they outgrew the set that you had in your garden,
Yeah.
but they didn't outgrow the park. They
No.
didn't outgrow their
I
bicycles. They did.
I'm talking about a different direction here on this, is like they didn't out my kids are super but I know that presence, and I know when I've done this too often, and I know, right? But there are people that are going to say, they're going to hear this and say, I'm overwhelmed. I don't have time. I'm working. He's working. We don't have help. We don't have a village. Where is the time? Can we slow everyone down and come up with what people need to hear about being present? It's the best gift I've ever been given, is being present with my kids. It's also very hard with all
Not.
the other stuff
It's
going on in
it's.
your life.
There's two things.
Yeah.
If you are a mother who is diagnosed or shows characteristic traits of ADD, which you do, right? Then your mind is running 1,000 miles an hour because you're thinking of all the things that you need to get done. And then you've got a tap on your shoulder that's saying, be present with the kids and be mindful. So I would say for anyone that's in your position, the practice of being mindful every day is an art that will not be lost on anyone, let alone an adult that shows adult ADHD, right?
Yep.
Because the
Yep.
practice of mindfulness allows us to remain present and connected, not just with ourselves and centered, but also to then show that to our children and establish that healthy habit with our children, right? However,
Yes.
maybe not. Maybe you don't have those characteristic traits. And then I would say to you, instead of finding 1,000 excuses for why you cannot, let's look at 1,000 reasons of why you must, and then start to look at your day and prioritize what becomes important, right? And then we have to look at externally what that looks like. So if you're a mother right now and both your kids are at school or daycare, and when you get home, the time that you get home, you know that you want to have the children in bed for a certain time, because you understand as a parent it's important for them to have their sleep, right?
Yes.
then you are going to engineer backwards what that
Okay.
looks like as far as bath time, as far as family time, and food, right? Then you're going to start looking at the meals that you're going to prep beforehand so that it's easy. And then you're going to look at what they come to you with respects to that connection, because it's better to have 20 minutes of connection every day than sporadically an hour here or there, right?
True.
Because it builds the trust that you will be present with them and they need that connection. Now let me just put something out into the fire here.
Yeah.
A lot of daycare centers in America right now are sending their children home, right, at 3:30. For actually, I say that again. A lot of daycare centers right now are having parents pick up their children, right, at like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and they've not even had dinner. So by the time the parent gets the child home at 6 o'clock, the parent now has to think, right, I've got to feed the child, then I want to have some time. And then it feels like a conveyor belt of trying to get the minutiae tasks of this nighttime routine in place. And
Yep.
that is where I think externally, daycares have to change their routine in order to help parents. Because if I'm picking my child up at 6 o'clock, then those daycare centers should have already fed my children.
Very.
Because children as young, as 5 years old, they really should be eating dinner time by 4:30, 4:45. Now, if you're not getting your kid home till 6 o'clock, that child is hungry because
Yep.
they've not had substantial food. They've had a lump of cheese and a couple of crackers, and if you're lucky, 2 grapes,
Yep.
right? So by the time they get home, massive behavior meltdown because their blood sugar levels dropped, they're hangry, you're exhausted from your day at work, and you're thinking, right, I've got to do dinner now, I've got to cook, they're hangry, I want to spend time with them, and we want to do bath time and snuggle cuddles before they go to bed. By the time you get to hangry and you finish cooking dinner,
Yep.
you don't even want to sit down with them because now you're all agitated and you're upset and
Yeah.
you're both a ball
And
of
you're
mess.
then like I don't want to say crappy, but you're feeding them something that you're like, oh gosh, all right, pasta, because I didn't plan anything else, and then the whole night's out of control. That's a big thing is the after school meltdown. I used to say, why is it that my kids, I feel like they melt as they're getting off the school bus and like all of a sudden their shoes are on the ground outside, their backpacks are on the ground outside. They're in the house and they're just like,
Well,
so
I think there's lots of reasons, why that does happen, right? I mean, there are long days, right, at school. In some parts of this country, they have really reduced and cut down recess
well,
time,
yeah,
playground time, which is a travesty. It's all based on academic and not enough playground interactions of play and children coming together. I mean, they've just reduced that significantly, that children are just in their seats at their desks and they're not playing and stretching their legs and having a refresher before they go back again. Then we have daycare centres that are not facilitating the amount of time that these parents are spending at work before they're picking up their children. And really, what are we talking about? We can't have a conversation about parenting in this day and age without actually looking at leadership and what that means. Corporate companies being more flexible and facilitating the understanding of what it means to work and raise a family. Leadership, those that are changing laws and policies and government that provide more resources and funding and training, right,
yeah,
for these places that parents feel supported by. And so
like,
there is a very real understanding of how parents are treading water right now and feel like they're in survival mode rather than thrive mode. And that's not to minimize, but it is to say, can we talk about the small, tangible, bite-sized things that we can do at home that will make a difference? Because I've been
Yeah.
teaching families that for 40 years and making a significant impact around the world doing that. And I want
Mm.
parents to change their mindset in saying, look, I realize right now that I might not be able to change X, Y, and Z, but I know I can change A, B, and C. And it's going to require this from me. And it's going to require, the steadfast of making sure that this is in place and I can follow through on that. And that does take energy. So what does it really all boil down to? It boils down to, what will we prioritize for ourselves? Where will we put those boundaries in place? Where will we prioritize us having that energy, because we need sleep and we need to make sure that we're energized every day? Like, sleep is number one.
Sleep is
It's
number
number
one.
one. Nothing's happening without good sleep. Nothing. We talk about sleep as if it's a luxury. It's a necessity. It's not a
Sleep.
luxury item on the top shelf.
Yeah.
It's a necessity. We need it for health, for brain health, for our relationships to function, to be of right mindset. And
Yeah.
guess what? All the distractions rob us of it every day. Whereas nature feeds us, sunlight feeds us, healthier choices, whether it's organic or not. I'm not even talking about organic,
Right.
right?
Right.
Help us.
Yeah.
Having healthy boundaries in place means we don't bleed over into another part of something that we need to prioritize. So we've got to start somewhere. We've got to
Absolutely.
start somewhere. And that's really where I come into it, when I start to say, let's take a look at your day. Let's unpack your day and see where we can start to make small tweaks and prioritize what is absolutely important right now for everyone's health. And once we've got that in play, we can take families out of the red box, put them into the
Good.
amber box, and then start going and working towards the green box. And that is not done overnight, right? But Nicki, every family's got to know why they're doing it. Why?
Good.
I know
Yep.
exactly why I'm in every house. I know
I love
exactly
I love
why.
that you just I
They
love
have
that
to
you
know.
just talked about the health, right? And the mindfulness, because that's not always something you get to see on the show. You're seeing like the parenting tactics, but the fact that you just talked about why I like how I got through my divorce, I've never been able to put a lot of people ask me, how did you get to the other side? Or how do you you just nailed it. The mindfulness that I've worked my ass off on that I've never said out loud. It's every freaking day.
The thing is that when people watched Super Nanny, they
Yeah.
watch a 42, 46-minute show.
It's
And let me tell you something, it is a painful experience to leave so much out when you
yeah.
only have 42 minutes. Like, every time I'm like, oh no, but that was good for the parents to learn that. And oh, we need to put this in here because and you can't put it all in when you've only got a 42-minute slot, right? So you have to make certain choices. But what families don't also see is the 200 hours I spend with families, where I've been in families' homes for 18 hours a day. Like, work that out. There's only 24 hours in a day. I've been in families' homes where I'm still there at 1 o'clock in the morning. All the crew have gone home, and they're like,
Oh, I'll never forget the co-parenting one when you sat in the hallway. I'm like, holy shit.
yeah, and
Oh shit.
the
Oh,
families are saying to me, "Oh, are you not going home?" I'm like, "No, like, I'm here to help you. This is what I do for a living." Oh, they all left. I thought you were gonna leave as well. Oh no, I'm here to help you. I can't
my gosh.
believe this. I can't believe that you're actually gonna be here until, like, they're all in bed, until they're all asleep. You mean until we go to bed? Like, I've literally kissed mum and dad goodnight. Like as I've walked out and gone, I'll close the door on my way out. Like that's the realness of
We need
that.
a where are they now show. We need a where are they now. Years later, are they still doing the Joe Frost techniques?
Who knows? Some of them keep in touch. Some of the families keep in touch, which is really lovely, and they let me how well they're doing. But in all fairness, Nikki, it would be very egotistical for me to attach myself to that as well. Meaning as a coach, as someone that goes in and helps families, you can and you hope that you can really help families transform and give them the education and coach and educate them so that they understand the importance of why they are going to do what's going to
Mm,
make a significant difference for themselves and their children. And that moment never gets old when the light bulb goes on and they're like, why didn't I do this earlier? Right?
yeah,
But you know that when you leave, you hope that they continue, but that's out my hands, that's out of my
right,
control. you
right.
can only do you can only do what you can do, and you always hope that that will be enough for them to have seen how capable they were, right, and the difference that it made, right, and that they will continue to do that, right. That's all you really can hope, that that will
Right.
happen. And that happens for obviously a lot of families that I work with. But it's important for families to know why.
The terms invisible labor, mental load, default parent. Have you heard these terms or are they just on my algorithm?
Um, I've heard them very loosely. I think really what we're talking about, right, is the things that, women take on board to think about, right? The things that they're doing. And I think I honestly feel that it's just another word, right? We
Yeah.
It's not like we haven't heard women talking about carrying the load before, right? I mean, throughout
Right.
generations, right? We are in a modern parenting space right now where we understand that our mindset needs to be in a place where we're in relationships that understand that these are tasks and that they're not gender rolled for either one, but that they are tasks, and that we you know understand the importance of us working together and doing so. And I think that's causing a little bit of strife right now, because we have these trends of conversations around what does that look like? What is your responsibility as a trad wife? And what should you be doing if, you are a man providing for your wife? Or what about if you're a working mother and the father is at home as the homekeeper and working, looking after the children? But to me, marriages are more fruitful, are closer in connection when we can understand that these are tasks. And I do believe that couples work in sync with work if they can work out really what tasks they are going to do together. And
Sure.
yes, there is a men's movement right now in understanding the importance of how men shift from how those traditional roles would be seen for
Yep.
men 2 generations ago to what that is now. But women are wired differently emotionally, and we will
Right.
and we will always carry that load
Well,
very differently to men. And I'm sorry if that offends men, but that's a fact.
so if you're talking to two people who are majority of people that I know are two people in a marriage, both working, woman's frustrated because she's working and she's carrying most of the weight at home. And then she's not wanting to sleep with the husband because she's annoyed and she's resentful. And like I know that this your thing is parenting, but I feel like when two parents can really come together, you're like the best type of parents you can be.
Well, that is parenting. Your parenting will be impacted if you are not jiving together as a couple. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
I would say number one, the real big problem that I see with couples that are in that space that you just mentioned is that there is not a conversation that finalizes the responsibility of duties between them both. What we have sometimes is a woman who will convey that she's not happy with such and such not being done, and then that not being taken seriously by the partner. And at that point, if it has been conveyed and you are now being disrespected because that is not being cohered to with respects to appreciated and respected, then it's time for therapy. It's time
Good.
to professionally seek the help in being able to say, look, here's where we're at.
Yeah.
I no longer want to be in this space where I'm carrying X, Y, and Z. And I want to have a conversation that looks like, how do we both take responsibility for the multiple of tasks that we endure as a family? Because there's an expectation there that the man expects the woman to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and for him not to do it at all. And
Yeah.
that's about healthy communication. But if you've got to the point where you have spoken about it and been minimized, then
Yeah.
that's about the relationship and the communication and the respect. You know, a lot of women will say to me, it doesn't get done unless he thinks it's important enough to get done.
Yep. Yep.
And that's minimizing what's
It's minimum.
important to the wife,
Mm.
what's important to the mother. And so again, what you are looking at is a healthier relationship that takes into consideration what both partners need to feel supported in the relationship. And if one person is not prepared to do that, or to do the work.
Right. That's what I'm seeing a lot. And then it goes into parenting and everything else.
Then the children are the sort of pawns on the chessboard, because now it's not about us and doing the jobs and getting the tasks done. It's that you don't do this and you don't do this, rather
Right.
than, you know, we're
The
on the
team
same
thing.
team. So what can be done? However, in saying all of that, I think we are wired differently. We're still going to take more on.
I remember going to do bath time, and I loved doing bath time. And I couldn't understand why he wasn't up there doing bath time with me. And he was on the couch and he was scrolling. But then if he did attempt to do bath time, to me it was like half-ass. So it's just this funny
Oh,
thing
now
of like,
that's something else. So that's something else. Let's just talk about that for a minute. Children duties, right? Meaning, you know, bathing the kids and spending time with the kids, both parents should be doing. And quite frankly, you know, like you said, if you've got a dad at work and he needs that moment and then he's going with the kids, that should be done. You should want to come home and spend time with your children, right? Because that's the time that you do have to see him. And if you're in a situation where you go up and you do go and do it, then you must allow them to do it their way, because it's how they do it. But I don't think that was the problem. I think the problem for most parents is that they know energetically the partner really don't want to do it. And that's what you're really annoyed
yes.
about. It's not that they're washing or putting the towels around the kids or doing this around that way and it's different to you. It's the fact that when they walked up them stairs begrudgingly, you're sitting there thinking as a mother, he don't even want to do it. How can he not even want to be with his own children when he's been at work all day and all these children want to be is with their dad, right?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
that's the problem. And it's
I've heard of a term for that one too. It's the something weaponized incompetence.
well, it's that, right? With what you speak of, that then needs to be the conversation. When you walk upstairs, like you really can't be bothered to do it, and when I say X, Y, and Z, and you're like, yeah, I guess so, it makes me feel like you just don't want to be with them at all. And I feel really hurt about that. So the communication is about you being vulnerable. It's about you being open enough to be vulnerable enough to say, it's making me feel this way. Like, can we talk about this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that there is very difficult for families to do if how you have felt in your vulnerable space has been used against you and weaponized.
Or if you have the feeling of like being a burden to someone, oh no, that doesn't go hand in hand with me. And that's the feeling, right? And that's what makes you overcompensate. So back to the overcompensate word from earlier, I overcompensate for what I know I can give versus what energetically their dad has.
Well, also, as well, with what you're saying, the overcompensating energetically, is that let's just take single parents and
Yep.
divorced mums as well. They overcompensate because even though they felt very clear about the decision that they wanted to make moving forward, right? They still look at the child and feel, but dad's not around. At the same time, dad's not around. And there is that pull as a mother to feel like, oh, I no longer am with their father, and now they're with me, and then they're with their dad, and it's, a separate home. And so again, it's a very understandable guilt.
Yeah.
But I don't subscribe to households where it's just not working out and kids are being dragged through something that they are being led to believe is healthy love relationship. No. And so children are a little bit more tougher than we really kind of give them credit for. Than we give them credit for, right? And we can be so polarized again on social media that we're like, oh, but their feelings. Oh, yeah, of course they have feelings, but they're also a lot tougher than we give them credit for too. And they can adapt, as long as both parents, as much as possible, and if you can't, then you can't. But if there can be a place that you can make it about the kids and not about yourselves, then you hope what you can do is transfer immaturity to a place of where it becomes about just showing up as you're supposed to for your kids, right? And it takes it off yourselves.
Yep. It's an uphill climb. Sometimes
a slow walk incline.
But you keep going forward. Yes. So I can't help but go right into this. I'm thinking in my head, the state of marriage, because we're talking parenting and we're talking raising kids. But let's talk about that dynamics once kids are born, how that changes things for marriage.
How did it, without saying too much, how did it change for you?
Oh gosh, I could say 1,000 things that were wrong with him, and I could say 1,000 things that were wrong with me in hindsight. So it's what you said. I can describe myself in it, and it's where you said overcompensate. So I had miscarried our first pregnancy at 20 weeks, twins. And my life I was the lean in corporate girl that everyone, like, I had the dream job, right? And all of a sudden I was pregnant, and I was this, like, I remember one of my best friends said to me, of course your first pregnancy is twins, a boy and a girl. Like, why wouldn't it go that way for you? And that was like the epitome of my life at that time. And when I miscarried, that was the first time that I was like shook to my core. First time I had major anxiety. First time I was like, wait, this isn't like the perfect happily ever, right? All the things that I imagined my life being.
Grief, loss, and trauma for these emotions of loss and really feeling so very lonely in those circumstances where you had probably people around you but felt like they just couldn't feel everything that you were feeling. And that's the kind of sort of oxymoron of this situation, in that you can be surrounded by loving family and yet still feel incredibly alone, even though people can relate, to grief, loss, death, yet such an isolating feeling for you as a mother. and
Yep.
feeling very emotionally alone.
Right. And then I went back to work, like you said with my family, like perseverance, resilience, got back to work within like a week after that and was back in it. And then so jump ahead. And I think by the time we had Layla and Chase, we had a few other losses in between. Chase is actually a twin. His twin is a stillborn. So after all of that, all I could think of is how lucky I am. Look at these two healthy children. Like it's just, and then the pandemic and then the divorce. And I feel like overcompensation is everything. That describes all of me to so many different parts.
Well,
Like
what it describes is 15 minutes ago when I asked you about your why of overcompensation. What it talks about is the sort of complex sort of trauma of not just looking at your own life, but as a grown woman, right? Your own sadness, your own grief, your own experiences. And really, what we're saying is the most important thing here is for every woman that goes through this type of loss is to understand how important it is to get that emotional support and even that professional support, right? Because this is something that you will live with in your heart, right? And of course it's going to have a subconscious and conscious impact in how you raise the children who were healthy enough to be here with you on this earth, right? Whilst the
yes.
others are looking
Oh, yes. They
down
sure are.
upon you and with you, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and that's the kind of layered cake of families, right? It's not black and white. It's about looking at the middle of the cake. It's not just the top and the bottom, it's what's in the middle. It's always about what's in the middle that brings people to a space of how they show up in life, the decisions they make, their own behavior patterns, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that is what is most important that we really speak about, is that grey area and
Yeah.
talking about that. It's what you saw when you went into homes with me, when either I was doing, Super Nanny or Joe Frost Nanny on tour, or whether I
Yeah.
was doing Family Matters and talking to families. It's the heart of what's behind the door, the conversations, the families. That was and still remains riveting to families because it's not 30 seconds on social media, da-da,
Right. Right.
da-da.
Right.
It's, everybody has, their own adversity, their own struggles, their own hurdles in life, and how do we support each other in our communities? How do we give grace to others through these difficult times? How do we draw upon more empathy instead of judgment? How do we give ourselves that, right, when we've not been taught to do so? And enjoy plenty of moments of joy in the journey of parenting, right?
I love Joe, you were so beautiful and you shared so much with me that made me change my perspective, not only on myself and my journey, but on how I look at others, even online, even on social media, even my own mom. I want to call her and give her a hug and tell her you did the best you could. Thank you. But where can we find you now? Where do you want people to look for you? Because you're still doing all the stuff.
I am. JoeFrost.com, my website, for those that are looking for private help, right? And then all my social media accounts, Joe Frost. Yeah, you'll find
Love
me
it.
there. So it is the only place you will find me with my advice.
For until further notice, I swear you're going to do a podcast or
Oh,
or another book.
yeah,
A
right
sub-
right now, right now I am doing stuff, so that will be, shared
All right.
once
I
that one's
can't
ready to
wait.
come out. Yes.
I
Thank you.
can't wait. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.